Have you ever wondered what existed before the world we know? Before Midgard, before the gods themselves? Imagine a time when there was no sun, no moon, no sky, no earth, nothing but a vast, yawning emptiness. In that emptiness, two primal worlds stirred, one of biting frost and darkness, the other of fire and raging heat. From their meeting would be born everything, the gods, the giants, even humankind. But before all that came to pass, there was only the breath of creation waiting to be exhaled. This is the story of Niflheim and Muspelheim, the first worlds, the primal forces that shaped the destiny of the cosmos. Let us begin our journey. At the dawn of time, though time itself had not yet been invented, there stretched a boundless void known as Ginnungagap. This was no ordinary emptiness. It was not simply nothing. Ginnungagap was the great chasm, a silent, cosmic womb holding the potential of everything yet to come. Imagine a space so vast that you could fall forever and never touch bottom. No ground, no sky, no horizon to give you comfort. There was no up or down, no left or right. There was no air to breathe, no light to see by, no sound to break the silence. And yet, this emptiness was not dead. It pulsed quietly, like the slow heartbeat of something enormous and unseen, waiting for its moment to awaken. If you stood, if standing were even possible, in this void you would feel nothing on your skin. No warmth, no chill. Only a stillness so complete it might drive you mad. The Norse poets described Ginnungagap as a place that was both terrifying and holy. It was neither friendly nor hostile, for it was not yet anything at all. It simply was. And then, far at one end of this void, something began to change. A mist arose, a breath of cold air that seemed to seep out of nowhere, curling and thickening until it became a world in itself. This was Niflheim, the first realm to take shape in the formless nothingness. It was not merely cold, it was the source of coldness. Its very essence was frost, shadow, and the heavy breath of mist that clung to every surface. The ground of Niflheim, if it could be called a ground, glittered with ice as old as time itself. 9 venomous rivers flowed from a mysterious source at its heart, the roaring spring of Ymir. These rivers were no gentle streams. They frothed and hissed as they rushed outward, their waters laced with venom that stung and burned like acid, even as they froze into great slabs of rime. The names of these rivers were sung in whispers: Svol, Gunthra, Fjorm, Fimblethal, Srhr, Swajar, Wildjar, and Leapjar. Each one was said to have its own will, twisting and turning as though seeking to escape the realm that birthed them. Where these rivers flowed, they left behind layer after layer of glittering ice, building up into massive fields of frozen death. The air was so cold it seemed to slice through flesh like a knife. There was no sun here to give warmth, no moon to offer light, only a perpetual half-darkness broken by the glint of distant, frozen mist. Niflheim was silence made solid. A place where nothing grew, nothing stirred, and nothing dared to live, and yet, in its own way it was alive. The venom in the rivers carried something strange, a kind of chaotic potential. Some skalds claimed that if you looked closely enough, you could see shapes forming within the ice, as though the frost itself was dreaming. The realm felt restless, as if it were waiting for something to set it in motion. And while this land of ice brooded in the far north of Ginnungagap, far to the south another force was awakening, one that could not have been more different. Muspelheim was born in fire. Not the fire of a cozy hearth, but fire so fierce it seemed to eat reality itself. It roared and spat sparks into the void, sending waves of blistering heat rolling out across Ginnungagap. Here, flames leapt skyward like living creatures, writhing and twisting in their endless hunger. The very ground was a sea of molten rock, forever shifting and cracking, glowing with veins of orange and gold. Where Niflheim was silence, Muspelheim was noise, a constant crackle and roar that echoed across the emptiness. The air itself burned, shivering with waves of heat that could strip the flesh from bone. This was the realm of the fire giants, beings forged of pure flame and fury, whose very presence was a threat to anything soft and mortal. And towering above them all was Surtur, the first fire giant, a figure of unimaginable power. In his hand he bore a sword that burned brighter than the sun, and with it he stood guard at the borders of his world. The myths say that even the gods feared Surtur, for they knew that one day he would march forth from Muspelheim and set the cosmos ablaze. 4 ages beyond counting, these two realms stood at opposite ends of Ginnungagap, locked in a silent opposition. They did not touch, for the void was wide between them, but their presence alone was enough to shape the very character of the cosmos. One was absolute stillness, the other absolute movement. One was deathly cold, the other impossibly hot. One could freeze a soul, the other could incinerate it. But Ginnungagap could not remain still forever. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the borders of these worlds began to creep outward. The venomous rivers of Niflheim stretched farther into the void, their icy winds blowing into the endless darkness. And from the south came the breath of Muspelheim, sending sparks and flames licking outward, chasing the shadows. It was as though the cosmos itself was breathing, pulling these forces closer and closer to one another. The ice of Niflheim began to crack and shudder as the heat reached it, melting here, freezing there, creating strange, jagged landscapes that glistened like glass. The flames of Muspelheim hissed as they struck the frost, sending clouds of steam billowing into the void. And so, little by little, the two realms drew nearer, though they were still separated by the yawning chasm. The universe had found its first great tension, a pull between opposites that would not be denied. This was the stage upon which everything would be born. Fire and ice, movement and stillness, chaos and quiet. Two worlds utterly opposed yet destined to meet. And when they finally did, creation itself would begin. As the ages passed in silence, the boundaries of the first worlds pressed ever outward. The venomous rivers of Niflheim kept flowing, spilling their icy venom into the void, and with every drop the frost thickened, forming great slabs of rime that stretched like fingers into Ginnungagap. The air became colder, the mist denser, until the void itself seemed to shiver with the touch of Niflheim's breath. From the south, Muspelheim answered with its own breath. Sparks leapt outward like shooting stars, flying across the abyss to land on the edges of the frozen plain. Heat rolled through the gap, hot enough to crack the ice, hot enough to make it weep with steam. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the two realms crept toward one another, not in malice, not in love, but because the universe demanded that they must. Imagine it now, the first moment when frost and fire met. A hiss like the exhalation of a god filled the air. Ice began to drip, and the drops did not fall to any ground, for there was no ground, but hung suspended in the void, glimmering in the half-light of Muspelheim's sparks. And then, something impossible happened. Those drops of melting rime began to move of their own accord. They gathered, swirling together like a slow dance until they formed a shape. What rose from that shape was not merely a creature, but the first living being in the history of the cosmos. His name was Ymir, and he was vast beyond measure. His skin was pale as frost, his breath a fog that rolled across Ginnungagap, and every step he took seemed to shake the very foundations of nothingness. He was both terrifying and magnificent, a child of opposites, born of deathly cold, quickened by fire's heat. Ymir was alone, but not for long. As he lay in the endless void, he began to sweat. And from the sweat of his armpits, life began to multiply. From one arm came a male, from the other a female, the first of the frost giants who would go on to populate Jotunheim. Even his legs were not still, for from them came a strange being with 6 heads, another monstrous ancestor of the giant race. Ymir himself became the father of a world of beings that would soon fill the darkness with noise and movement. But Ymir could not survive on his own. The drops of ice had given him life, but life needs nourishment. And so, as the ice continued to melt, a second miracle emerged. A cow, great and gentle, her hide shining like moonlit snow. Her name was Audhumla, and from her teats flowed 4 rivers of milk that streamed endlessly, providing Ymir with the sustenance he needed. Audhumla herself licked the salty blocks of ice to feed, and as she licked, the ice gave way to yet another figure, not a giant this time, but something new, something different. From the rime she uncovered the shape of a man, tall and strong, with features noble and serene. This was Buri, the first of the gods, whose descendants would one day rule over the 9 worlds. For now, though, there were no worlds, only Ginnungagap, Ymir, Audhumla, and the first rivers of life spreading outward into the void. The meeting of fire and ice had not merely created life, it had set in motion the entire cycle of existence. But the birth of life also brought with it the birth of danger. Ymir, vast and restless, was not a benevolent being. His children, the frost giants, grew wild and numerous, filling the emptiness with their fierce cries. They were creatures of chaos, as unpredictable as the venomous rivers from which they had ultimately sprung. The gods, not yet many but destined to multiply, saw in Ymir a threat to the order they hoped to bring into the cosmos. From Buri came a son, Bor, and from Bor came 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve, who would soon play the most crucial role in the shaping of everything that followed. But that is a tale for another fire, another night. For now, our gaze turns back to the primal forces that began this story, Niflheim and Muspelheim. Even as life began to stir, these 2 realms continued their eternal dance. Niflheim exhaled its icy breath, covering the void in mist and frost, reminding all things that death was always near. Muspelheim sent forth its flames, keeping the void alive, searing away stagnation, burning with the promise of transformation. The Norse skald saw this not as mere geography, but as truth about the nature of existence. We are all forged between fire and ice. The heat of passion, ambition, and change drives us forward, while the chill of caution, memory, and death holds us in check. Life happens in the space between these 2 forces, just as creation happened in Ginnungagap. Even the stars in our sky, they said, were born from sparks that flew off Muspelheim's eternal fires. The sun itself was kindled there, a great blaze hurled into the void to light the worlds to come. Without Muspelheim there would have been no light, no warmth, no growth. And yet, without Niflheim there would have been no form, no solidity, no place for light to fall. This balance is fragile. The myths remind us that the same fire that brought life into being will one day destroy it. At Ragnarok, Surtur will rise from Muspelheim, swinging his sword of flame, setting fire to Yggdrasil itself, the great world tree. The 9 worlds will burn, the gods will fall, and what began in fire will end in fire. Niflheim too holds its part in the ending. For when the last battle is over, the mist will rise again, and the world will sink back into stillness, waiting to be remade. Death will once again reign as it did before time began, until perhaps fire stirs once more and begins the cycle anew. And so, the tale of Niflheim and Muspelheim is not merely about the beginning of things, but also about their end. It is a story of tension, of balance, of the thin line between creation and destruction. The Norse people knew that the world is not permanent. It is a fragile thing held together by the struggle of opposites. This is why their myths are so powerful even today. They remind us that life itself is forged in conflict, that the things which challenge us, the forces that seem most opposed to one another, are the very things that make growth possible. Without struggle there would be no story, no journey, no change. And so we leave the first chapter of creation. The void is no longer empty. Life has begun. The giants have been born. The gods are stirring. The stage is set for everything that will follow. The building of the world, the shaping of Midgard, the wars between gods and giants, and the long path that leads to Ragnarok. From the breath of ice and the blaze of fire came all that ever was and all that ever will be. And perhaps, one day when the final flames have died and the last frost has melted, they will meet again and another story will begin. So I ask you, what do you see in this tale? Is it simply a myth, or is it a reflection of something deeper? A truth about the way all things are born, live, and die? Maybe, just maybe, we are all children of fire and ice, walking the narrow space of Ginnungagap, making our own worlds as we go. Thank you for walking with me through the mist and the flame. If you enjoyed this journey into the first worlds, tell me in the comments which force you think rules your own life more, the fire of Muspelheim or the cold breath of Niflheim. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next part of this saga. Until we meet again, may you walk boldly between fire and ice.